Hey, it's Mazzy here, and welcome back. This is a special day, March 30th, 2025. Today, God turns 80 years old. God was born in 1945 in Kent, Surrey, in England. Some say he was reborn again in the mid-60s, 1965 or 1966 in Islington, London. Eric Clapton is God. You've seen that graffiti from the mid-60s in England, and that expanded throughout England and around the world. The great guitar player, British guitar player, one of a handful of great British guitar players in the 1960s who listened to a lot of American R&B and blues music and gave it back to us Americans who were more interested in the British, in their music. We ignored our own roots for so many years, and it took artists, guitar players like Eric Clapton, like the Animals, like the early Rolling Stones, like Jeff Beck, like Jimmy Page, like Peter Green, all the blues bands, the blues artists, the blues and R&B, the Beatles with R&B, but they're more with the soul thing and that. You know, they didn't give us in the same way as the Stones and the Yardbirds and Fleetwood Mac and all those bands throughout the 1960s. So I am here to wish Eric Clapton a very happy 80th birthday today, March 30th, 2025. Clapton is God. People believe that in terms of his playing. He was, to some people, the guitar player. Now, I'm not going to go through his entire catalog, and I have those of you who've been watching me since the beginning know my love-hate with Eric Clapton. Now, I can't deny that I actually like a lot of Eric Clapton's music, and I'm going to just touch on the early stuff, but mainly this is going to take place in the 1970s, that somewhat misunderstood period. The boomers still hold on to that. Was he lazy then? He was Slowhand then? I know that was kind of a tongue-in-cheek name for Eric Clapton, but he kind of, took a step back from those hot guitar things from the 1960s when he was like one of, or maybe there's only one God. This is just a comp, but the Yardbirds, of course, he joined in 1963, the end of that year, that great British blues band, and that's what he loved. But once they did that Mickey Mouse produced Graham Gouldman song, For Your Love, it was more poppy that he liked, and he was out of there. Forget it. I'm out of the Yardbirds, and I'm hooking up with John Mayall's blues band with Eric Clapton. God is on this record. God is reading Beano on this amazing record with John McVie and John Mayall and Huey Flint on drums. There you go. Fantastic, right? One of the essential British blues albums. And then, of course, he leaves that. What an impatient guy, right? And starts Cream with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. That became the super group in a way, the psychedelic blues band, and they made 4 records. They lasted less than 2 years, and I don't want to dive into their deep catalog here, but I want to show Wheels of Fire only because the live album on this band is on fire. They're revved up and they're speedy and they're amazing. You know, the bass guitar licks between Eric and Jack and the drumming. This is an incredible live disc. I like White Room and I love Press Rat and War Dog, and I love the studio disc too, Passing the Time, Sitting on Top of the World, of course. This is a great one. Those Were the Days. Politician. Oh, yeah. But anyway, what a great cover with this metallic-y, wonderful cover. This is the American edition. This is on fire. But 2 years out of here, impatient again. They didn't get along in a certain way, but they made great music. 24 months, less than that. And even a band that lasted, what, 3.5 hours maybe? And that's Blind Faith. This is a wonderful record. What could have been, should have been, with that great soulful singing of Stevie Winwood, of course. Rick Gretsch, Ginger Baker, and Eric Clapton. This is a one-off. I never saw them. I wish I did. I never saw Cream to begin with. I did see on the reunion tour, night 2, at the Royal Albert Hall, where everything was about 25% less fast. And instead of that SG, I believe Eric played Blackie, played the Strat. So it was great, but it wasn't as on fire. But you've heard probably those recordings. So we all know that. But let's talk about the 1970s and Eric. I'm not going to get into his addiction and the story of Eric Clapton. This is kind of a celebration of his music in the 1970s. Some of it is wonderful. Some of it is not so wonderful. Some of it is mediocre. He kind of slowed down, except at the beginning in 1970. That was really a magic year for Eric Clapton. Delaney Bonnie brings him and produces this album. Of course, he leaves Cream because he hears music from Big Pink. I want to play that stuff. He wants to play that organic, soulful American music from For Canadians and American, known as the band. He gets hooked up with Delaney and Bonnie, goes on tour, Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, and he's great in that. That's a great mix. And I have done a few videos on, I call gospel according to rock and roll, where it's white gospel music. Everyone from Joe Cocker to Leon Russell to Delaney and Bonnie to even George Harrison, a little bit of John Lennon, that's maybe stretching it, Eric Clapton, but there's a lot of that kind of blue-eyed soul rock gospel stuff. Even Take Me to the Pilot a little later with Elton John. There's that period from like 68, 69 to about 73 or so, that really kind of rock and gospel stuff that's so cool. Search on this channel. I think I did 2 video versions of that. But this is a great, great funky record. There is another mix on a CD expanded, 2 different mixes. I believe one was Tom Dowd and one was Delaney Bramlett, who produced this. There's the entire, looks like they're all there looking at the camera, and Eric is checking his phone, checking his Instagram feed. Actually, he's peeling an apple or something, whatever he's doing. I don't know. But this is a wonderful record. This is a rockin' record, and it's unexpected hits. This is where he started covering a lot of American songwriters, not the traditional blues, but contemporary songwriters. In this case, he plays After Midnight, the J.J. Cale song here. And he would make J.J. Cale a very rich man, that Oklahoman guitar player and singer. That first album is Naturally. Another one has that kind of soulful, swampy sound. And After Midnight became a pretty big hit for him. Bad Boy is on here, a bunch of songs co-written by Leon Russell and Delaney Bramlett. Blues Power, Leon Russell and Eric Clapton. That is a great song. Another Bramlett and Clapton song, Bottle of Red Wine, and it goes on and on. Ends with a great, great collaboration of Bramlett and Clapton, Let It Rain, one of the great songs. This is a killer record. There's still fire in Eric on this record. He loves being with these Americans and not, the blues posers, I guess, of the UK. I'm just using that phrase, but this is a great record, self-titled record. End of that same year, again, Derek and the Dominos. He puts a band together where he's not necessarily the leader. This is one hell of an album. And he starts relinquishing a lot of the great guitar parts. Layla, what a great piece of music. I won't get into the whole controversy or the Jim Gordon stealing from Rita Coolidge on that end piano outro on that. But you have Duane Allman playing the intro lead, not Eric Clapton, not God. God's off the lead, and you got Duane Allman on a lot of this record. And of course, same with the vocals. You trade off. You have the great Jim Gordon, who led a tragic life later on. You got the great vocals and keyboard of Bobby Whitlock. This wouldn't be the same without Bobby. So you got his soulful style, that great vocalizing, that southern sound of Bobby Whitlock on here. But this is a wonderful record. Bell Bottom Blues, double album, killer at the end of 1970. I Looked Away, I Am Yours, Key to the Highway, Tell the Truth. So they go into some standard blues, like Key to the Highway is a cover, but then you go original by Bobby Whitlock and Eric Clapton, Tell the Truth. Have You Ever Loved a Woman, the Billy Miles song, and a great cover of Little Wing, the Jimi Hendrix song. Of course, Layla. Layla, what a epic record. Just a great single that took a while. This album took like almost a year to catch on and to get radio play, but it's a fantastic record. There's the Strat there, no more SG. Throughout the 70s, it's more about the Stratocaster, and his infamous Blackie would come a little later. I don't know the whole lineage and this history of his guitars. You will probably know, but this is a great album. But then, of course, the hiatus retreats, the drug addiction during several years, for about 3, almost 4 years. And then 461 Ocean Boulevard. They actually had to change the name of this studio in Miami because of that. I think too many tourists going or something. This is an album that I loved when it came out. Now, this is a different Eric Clapton. This is where he's into the songwriters. He's influenced by so many things. He's not on fire as a player. Tom Dowd produces this. They go down to Miami. They go to Criteria Recording Studios. The Bee Gees would record their main ingredient, I think. You know, that soulful kind of dancey thing was just percolating with them. And Tom Dowd produces this. And this is a cool-ass record. Again, some covers, some traditional songs. He takes on the blues. He takes on the gospel things and reworks them a little bit. The opening Motherless Child, and then a original Give Me Strength. Does a Johnny Otis favorite, Willie and the Hand Jive. Get Ready, he wrote with Yvonne Elliman. Now, Yvonne Elliman, I could not talk about God. I could not talk about God without talking about Mary Magdalene. Yvonne Elliman was the original Mary Magdalene in Jesus Christ Superstar in 1970 on the box set with Ian Gillan as Jesus. Then she recreated her Mary Magdalene role in the movie version of Jesus Christ Superstar. You see the connection here? God and Mary Magdalene on the same record. Now, I love that vocal mix. And to Eric's credit, or maybe he just didn't want to do all the work anymore, he allowed Yvonne Elliman to sing several leads on some of the records. I think she was on 3 or 4 of these records in a row. She went on tour with the band. It's just a great combination. I love her voice. Remember that album of hers? I don't have it anymore. It's like on the cover, she's eating the lime jello, looking at the camera. I need to find that record just for shits and giggles. I don't remember if it's any good. Now, there's a song in there. My girlfriend and I at the time had a song, our song on here. Schmaltzy's song on here is Let It Grow, Let It Blossom, Let It Flow. But a beautiful song, but a ballad, a kind of a soft rock song. He's getting in a soft rock period here. Now, also, he is all in on reggae music and Bob Marley and covering his songs. I Shot the Sheriff, which became a huge hit. A lot of the American audience really didn't know reggae. Back in the 60s, we didn't know it was called reggae when we heard The Israelites by Desmond Decker. And, you know, those records were getting known, those Bob Marley records finally, and Eric Clapton covers it and really opens the door for another segment. I mean, a lot of us knew Bob Marley, loved those records in the early mid-70s, but, you know, I hate to say it, you know, the white guy, the British white guy covers reggae. Now, the unfortunate thing from my point of view, too many reggae riffs and reggae arranged songs over the next several albums. He really went all in on that, the chunka 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 chunka, the reggae thing going on. But this is a good record again. But he takes backseat to the lead guitar and goes with the songwriting. This was successful again. Eric Clapton's album 461, Ocean Boulevard, an album I quite like. There you go. Then the following year, in 1975, again produced by Tom Dowd. This is Eric Clapton, There's One in Every Crowd. Another spiritual journey, reaching in about the spirituals of Jesus, opening up. A couple covers here. We've Been Told, Jesus is Coming, and then Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, the old gospel song. Ka-chunk, 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 reggaeized. So Eric kind of does this reggae thing. You know, there's a period of time as we get into the late 70s that after a while I couldn't stand this stuff. And I couldn't listen to it for decades. That tired Eric Clapton. But he kind of did okay. It was up and down. He sold some records. I'm not even going to get into the 80s and 90s and his rebirth with Unplugged and all that stuff, because that's another story for another day. This is about God and God's comeback in the 1970s. The Sky is Crying is, to me, the best song on the album. And that is a blues song, obviously written by Elmer James. And what's interesting about it, you know, Clapton, obviously, from the early days with the Yardbirds and with Cream even, they covered a lot of blues stuff, you know, a lot of blues things. But something about Eric singing, the slowness of the version of The Sky is Crying, you believe it. Sometimes throughout a few days later and a few of these albums I'm going to show, I don't believe he's singing the blues. And, you know, with the Yardbirds, there was a different style. With Cream, they psychedelicized it. It wasn't the same type of blues. It was a psychedelized blues, which I like, but it was a different blues. But I believe him here. Now, I'm not showing live albums on this video. So the Rainbow and the live Derek and the Dominos and whatever else came out live, I'm not doing that. I'm not talking about the concert for Bangladesh, but I will say there is a thing going around this period, this whole time, because one of his best friends is George Harrison. What an incestuous, weird friendship, a lifelong friendship that was. And I will throw this in now so I don't forget it later. As much as I've been hot and cold about Eric Clapton, in 2003, I think, the concert for George, I attended at the Royal Albert Hall. Eric put that show on for George, brought it together. You really saw a true friend of George Harrison's, bringing his family and bringing all these wonderful artists and arranging the whole night, working with other musicians. That was one of the most incredible musical nights I ever saw. I did see him at the Last Waltz in the 70s, 76. Did it further on down the road. Great job. Those guys were coked up. Everyone on that stage was. But you also have what's interesting about this period of Eric Clapton. You have George Terry. You have a second guitar player who takes on a lot of the solos that Eric doesn't seem to be on fire for anymore. There's a slow shuffle to some of this music. It's at a medium rate. It's not on fire. But there's some great songs and great covers on here. Pretty Blue Eyes is a nice song. I believe that's the one, it seems to me, probably about Patty, Harrison Clapton. And it's got a little kind of a Beatle harmony, a Beatle George Harrison, little bit from like the song Badge that Harrison and Clapton wrote together. So this is, this is a good album. All these albums are good. Not a lot of them, though, are great. But there's, on every album by Eric Clapton in 1970, there's a couple of great tracks. It's just when he does that chunk of reggae, like, let's just make everything a reggae song. Next, from 1976, is No Reason to Cry. Literally another cover of a Bob Marley song here. And see that picture? Insert a picture of me in 1976. I didn't on purpose look like Eric Clapton, but you can kind of see my Eric Clapton from 1970, Mazzy's version. That's enough of that. Now this is a really good record. This is a record that has the entire band on it. Literally the band. Music from Big Pink, that band is all over this record. Part of this was recorded in LA at the band's studio in LA. There's a great song co-written by Rick Danko of the band and Eric Clapton, and they both do they both sing lead on it on several tracks on here. It's All Our Pastimes. The opening track, Beautiful Thing, written by Rick Danko and Richard Manuel of the band. There's a killer song. The best song on this is a Bob Dylan song that he hadn't recorded at the time called Sign Language. There's a whole story apparently that where the studio was, Dylan was sleeping for a while, for a few weeks or months, in a tent on the grounds, would come up to the studio, bring a song, they'd like it or not like it. But he sings that song with Eric Clapton, and it's friggin' brilliant. Robbie Robertson on that twangy guitar. It's a Dylan song with Eric Clapton, like, added. It's the essence is Bob Dylan. If you're a Dylan fan, you need, one way or another, a copy of Sign Language. Dylan sings his own verse, Eric sings his verse, and they sing together in that kind of, not in sync, vocalizing like like Dylan did with Johnny Cash on Nashville Skyline, where it's almost like they're not listening to each other, but it's killer. So Sign Language is the killer. It's worth it for the entire album. I mean, to get this album because of that one song. But I would argue also, having this band, the band, on this entire album really makes this one of the special ones in the 1970s. And I just love it. Again, it's that kind of chill, swampy sound. This kind of stuff that Eric Clapton, the reason he got into the band, and Delaney and Bonnie, it wasn't for that fire British blues retread of American blues artists and using electric. It's a whole different thing. There's a lot of country and roots music that Eric Clapton was getting into at that time. Here's a promo I got, and I love, this is my favorite cover art, Eric Clapton's Slowhand. What a great cover on this with Blackie. Great photograph, great cover. Just love this. Again, he makes money for J.J. Cale. The opening track on here, Cocaine. Now, I happen to have the promo from the label, Cocaine, Eric Slowhand Clapton on white. Get it? Cocaine on white. Find this promo. This is from 1977 when this album came out. It's an EP of Cocaine, The Core, Lay Down Sally, Wonderful Tonight. Now, Wonderful Tonight is one of those great 70s schmaltzy songs that Eric Clapton wrote and recorded. It's a beautiful song. It's one of those songs that's probably in a half a dozen rom-coms. Lay Down Sally's great on here too as well. That is a Marcy Levy, Eric Clapton collaboration. But again, Cocaine, that great riff, J.J. Cale did it, and Eric Clapton covered it. He's done a bunch of J.J. Cale songs. He does on here, We're All the Way. He starts doing some great covers of Don Williams songs. Not only songs written by Don Williams, the country singer who was on ABC Records in the 70s, but he does some songs that Don Williams covered himself and made famous, and Eric Clapton was listening to a lot of Don Williams records. He does an interesting cover here. It's nowhere near as good as the original of May You Never, that John Martin song. It's basically John Martin's greatest single song. Obviously, he does a lot of great kind of folky, jazzy, sultry records, but May You Never is his hero song, if you know what I mean. And he does a pretty good version of it. So that's on here. And then, of course, Mino Frisco, and didn't say who wrote that. I'm not quite sure, but some other great stuff. I like this record quite a bit, and it's a great sounding record. This is produced by Glenn Johns. There was 2 records in a row produced by Glenn Johns. And what's great about it, I think Eric Clapton needed a shot in the arm production-wise, and this was it. And it tightened things up with his band that he plays with. I just really like this record. It's a good record. And you got Yvonne Elliman again. You got George Terry again on guitar. Carl Rattle on bass. Carl Rattle was from the Layla band, Derek and the Dominos as well. And that's it. That's a great one. And lastly, to end the 1970s, this is a 1978 release. This is Eric Clapton, Backless. After this, he wouldn't do another album until the 1980s. I kind of quit. In fact, this is that crossover period, 77, 78. I was listening to television and Patti Smith and the Sex Pistols and the Clash and all those bands. And this kind of stuff was like, that's old boomer shit. So for decades, I couldn't listen to 1970s Eric Clapton. I could listen to Cream. I could listen to the Yardbirds. I could listen to Blind Faith even. And even a little bit of Derek and the Dominos. And the first album. But this stuff, this kind of like slow moving country, folksy, love ballads. Yawn, Eric, yawn. On here too, he does a cover. He ends up with Tulsa Time. Now, Tulsa Time was made famous by Don Williams, but it was written by Flowers. What's his first name? I forgot his first name. But there's some good tracks on here too. There's opens up with Walk Out in the Rain, not one of Bob Dylan's greatest songs, but he opens up with that. There's a bunch of originals, and there is one, I'll Make Love to You Anytime, another great cover by J.J. Cale on here. So, you can see some of the songs that Eric wrote on here are not great. In fact, there's 2 Dylan songs on here. The other one is If I Don't Be There by Morning is on here as well. But that is Backless, the 1978 and the final 1970s released by Eric Clapton. So that's a birthday video, a birthday overview of God's 1970s releases. So if you're a believer, check this music out. If you're a non-believer, go listen to something else. Mazzy loves you.